Well, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farba. The decision by Hungary to grant political asylum to former Polish Justice Minister Zbigniew Ziobro has triggered legal, political and institutional questions across Poland and the European Union. Now, with the Polish court now set to rule on his arrest, the case sits at the intersection of criminal accountability, EU asylum law and deep political polarization. Joining us to understand more of this and the legal realities and implications is Dr. Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik, Associate Professor at the Faculty of Law and Administration, University of Warsaw. Good to have you back in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
So it's a legal thriller in a way, but let's set out the basics here. I mean, asylum in an EU country from another EU member state. Tell us why this is so complicated and unique.
Well, first of all the EU member states should have very similar protection when it comes to human rights. So indeed, granting asylum in one of the EU member states to a citizen of another EU member state is a very strange situation, because normally the asylum mechanism is for the third country nationals. So people who escape prosecution, who escape torture, who escape really life-threatening situation, and also their freedoms, liberties, which are violated by the countries, whereas the very basis and fundamentals of the European Union are based on human rights, on dignity, on rule of law, and also how citizens should be treated equally. So indeed, this whole situation from the beginning is very, very specific.
Mm-hmm. Now, the former Justice Minister, he's charged with, I believe, over 26 charges, including the alleged misuse of funds. One of the things, as you said, this usually is about third countries trying to call this asylum law. If we're looking at now EU countries, now EU member states, and this comes from the Commission, I believe, have said they are all safe countries, and only in very exceptional circumstances can this be a legal defense. And I'm quoting here, only when a country is under Article 7 procedure. Now, Poland is no longer in such a procedure, so how much of a case does Hungary, does Ziobro have in all this, if any?
Well, actually, this decision to grant asylum is an administrative decision which is undertaken by the government of a state, meaning that the Hungarian government decided to grant asylum to Mr. Ziobro and his wife, as far as I know. So this is the individual administrative act which is issued by the member state. And indeed, this is a sort of discretionary decision, we might say, because even though that we have the legally binding conditions to issue this kind of administrative decisions, how they are interpreted is a matter of rather, I would say, discretionary decision. So, for example, the whole notion, if former Minister of Justice is currently facing some political consequences of his actions, meaning that he's like politically persecuted, that's something that is subject to review of the Hungarian government. Because we need to distinguish between political persecution and criminal charges. And Minister Ziobro, former Minister Ziobro, is facing detailed criminal charges, and the whole criminal process in Poland should be done based on the principle of the equality of the citizens before the law. So if he is leaving Poland, if he's escaping the country, claiming that he's politically persecuted, that is the subject of the revision of the authorities that decide to grant this kind of asylum to him.
So that's going to be complicated. I mean, if, as you said, if a member state of Hungarian authorities say, well, this is something we grant, at the same time we have the criminal charges from Poland, legally, what's the next step here? Let's say those persecutions go ahead. The Poles want to have him back here. They want to try him here. European arrest warrant. Where does this all fit in? What's the next scenario here?
Yes, for sure. We have this European instrument, which is European arrest warrant. It can be issued by the Polish court. If the Polish court decides that they need to investigate it further, then they need to arrest him. And that's the instrument that should be issued. And then also it should be respected by the member states. However, in practice, we already know that in some of the situations, it is not really effective. For example, in Poland, we have already a very similar case of the former Deputy Minister of Justice, Mr. Marcin Romanowski, who also left Poland and decided to request asylum in Hungary, and he was granted the asylum, even though that the European arrest warrant was issued against him. So this means that the Hungarian court should basically respect this European arrest warrant, but if it's not respecting it, then the situation is escalating to the European level. And by escalating to the European level, there is also a procedure. However, as we can see, it's not entirely effective, because Mr. Romanowski is already, as far as I remember, already 1 year living in Hungary, and there is no effective procedure to actually claim him back to Poland. However, I would say that there is also one more probability and possibility, because should the European institution find that Hungarian authorities are abusing actually the legal instruments, they are misusing those legal instruments, the European institutions could also possibly, there is an opportunity for them to intervene in this kind of situation. So that's also an option on the table.
But also in terms of if all those things happen, I mean, this is a kind of precedent that is, as far as I've learned here, very, very new. This is completely new precedent. What does this signal? Whatever the Hungarians decide to do, what the Polish authorities, what the EU does here, where does this take us in terms of law? And if there is such an enforcement, as you said, if the Poles are able to secure something, how is that realistically really enforceable?
Well, the problem is that the European Union as an organization, as an institution, is based on trust, is based on mutual recognition of legally binding instruments, is also based on shared values. And if the governments of the member states no longer share the same values, no longer speak the same language, then we are facing really big challenges. And that's the case, I think, currently in the European Union, that different member states sometimes speak different language. So here we have the contradiction between the values which are represented by the European law, by the European treaties, and the implementation of those values in reality in the member states. If the Hungarian government actually contradicts what the other member state of the EU is doing and on which basis the criminal charges are issued, then we have really a substantial problem.
It's also very complex in different layers. One of the things that Ziobro is arguing as well is that he cannot get a fair trial in Poland. So is there evidence to substantiate that? I mean, how do you argue that? How do we deal with this particular point?
Well, that's the claim that Mr. Ziobro has, and he is claiming that he is also politically persecuted in Poland, that he cannot enjoy his political liberty, political freedom. However, I would say it's very difficult to substantiate such an argument, because he's still a very active member of parliament. Also very powerful politician when it comes to his influences and the position in the party. So I would say that it's very difficult to substantiate such claims. Of course, it's important that every citizen of a country should face a fair trial, meaning to be that this trial should be done by the court, which is impartial and also independent from any political influence. As we know, Polish courts for several years are facing a lot of pressure. Also, the reform program which were undertaken by the former government also, I would say, attacked in many instances the freedom and independence of the courts. So basically, if Mr. Ziobro is currently claiming that he is not sure if he's going to face an independent trial, probably he is the very reason for this situation, because he tried to politicize, to influence the work of the courts.
And another layer I want to ask you about as well is Ziobro has also asked for some, also for his wife. Now, this is also an interesting point. Why do you think he's done that? What's her involvement in all this?
This is a very interesting legal question, because actually his wife does not face any charges in Poland. She's not accused of anything. So as a person who is not accused of anything and not facing any prosecutions, I would say that there is no legal basis, no legal grounds to actually grant this kind of asylum to her. I'm not sure what kind of evidence those two to persons provided in their requests to the Hungarian government, because we do not know exactly what kind of substantiation and justification was of this request. But from a legal perspective, it is very surprising that a person who is not facing any charges is actually being granted this kind of asylum.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I want to ask also, in terms of your experience and as a legal expert here, how do you see all this play out now? What's next? And we're waiting for this ruling, but then realistically, what do you see this, and how do you see this go down in the next few weeks and months?
I think that we have several scenarios, both legally and politically. Legally, as I already mentioned, there is a possibility that even the European institutions decide at some point to intervene in the situation, saying that it is impossible to actually accept this kind of situation between two member states. That's one of the legal scenarios. Politically, however, I would say that also we need to wait until April and what will happen in Hungary when it comes to elections. Should the government of Viktor Orban stay in power, or should they be left of the power because they might also lose the election? Also, we don't really know much about the potential actions of the new government, should the new government in Hungary be formed, because the current leader of the Hungarian opposition, Peter Magyar, he's saying that he's not going to continue the policy of Viktor Orban government when it comes to granting asylum. However, if he's indeed going to change the policy of the government, we don't know yet.
Mm-hmm. So complicated all around. But look, thanks for explaining that to us more and to our viewers. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. That was Professor Jowanka Jakubek-Lalik there.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.